Today's guest is Elease Wiggins, who is a multi-dimensional powerhouse TEDx speaker, self-published author, coach, philanthropist, and mom of two. In 2015, she incorporated Elease LLC, which is a coaching, speaking, and writing company. Then in 2018, she incorporated Communities Promoting Reading, which is a nonprofit organization that supports low-income adult students. And throughout her career, Elise's work has been dedicated to promoting self-awareness and self-improvement. So, Lise, thank you very much for being on. How are you doing today?
Thank you. All is well.
Awesome. I love it. And just even reading your bio, I know we are aligned in terms of, what we do for work and how we do it and in the viewpoint that we use to do it. So I'd love for you to just break down for us, who you are, how you got to doing what you're doing. Just give us a bit of context on you.
So originally, I was a adjunct professor in New York City, and I used to just give my students advice and give people advice. So it was like, you should do life coaching. So I started doing a little bit of light life coaching on the side. And then I realized, wait, I felt like I was repeating the same thing. So I put the information into a book, how I became self-published. And when I became self-published, I was like, wait, I need a publisher. So I incorporated myself. That's how my business started. And, it was okay coaching other moms and people who were experiencing similar things that I was experiencing. And then I started to teach in New Jersey, and I got the opportunity to do a TED Talk at the college. After I did the TED Talk, like, my business went into a totally different area. I started doing staff trainings for organizations and institutions that supported the women that I coached, because I realized, okay, I'm not making a lot of money coaching, so let me coach the institutions and organizations that support them. And then I started to realize, okay, there's so much more I wanted to do, but I was unable to do. So I started my non-for-profit organization for low-income adult students who were also head of household, who were going back to school to get their GED, ESL. So we started like with the basics, not just college students, but was unable to afford books and things they needed to get their education. So we partnered with Raymore and Flanagan, the furniture store, and we were able to donate book bags with scientific calculators and copies of my books to these women. Now, not just women and men, but now my business is pivoting again, where I'm doing program development, client and staff training. And it's almost to the point where what is it that I want to do and who am I doing it for? I think I've been doing it for so long, I kind of lost it a little bit. And that's why I'm here with you today.
Okay, awesome. Well, I love it. People just dive right into like, okay, like this is what I need support in. So
Give it to me
that makes my job easier. So I thank you for making my job easier. So it's all good. So let's dive right into it. So I understand clarity is a part of like what it is that you're seeking. So let's look at it like this first, right? Like, given that you're a coach yourself, how would you coach yourself through the situation that you're in?
So normally I would, and which is what I'm doing, I would tell a client that maybe they need to just step back. And that's what I'm doing now, and even coming to you, because sometimes I think that we have all of the answers in our mind, but there's so many different answers that we need to figure out which one is the right one. So number one is to take a step back. And number two would be to seek out a professional, someone who knows way more in the area that you're having trouble in. So those are the two main things that I would say.
Okay, perfect. So in that regard, if it's stepping back so that I can assess, what are my actual options? Are there blind spots that, I might be missing? I think the first place then is to look at, well, what is it that you actually want?
So the goal right now is to have a 10K month. And what I realized is that I was doing too much. So I know in order to get to the 10K month, there's a possibility that I might have to just focus on one thing.
Okay. And just for context, Is this like the first 10K month in this new venture? It's the first 10K month ever. It's consistent 10K months. Like, where are you at on that journey?
So it's all three. So it's the first 10K month with the fact that I, like I said, I have these two populations. I have individuals and I have institutions. So that's one. Two, it's the first 10K month coming back from COVID. So my business was so strong before COVID, and then I just took so many personal hits. The business kept going to the back burner, but now I'm back full steam ahead. And number three, it's the consistent 10K month.
Got it. So what do you think is stopping you from making that happen?
So I want to say that it seems as if every time I like reach some level of success, it seemed as if I got knocked back down 10 times. For example, back in November, I had grew a really huge Facebook group. Like I already had Facebook there for years and I just was posting every day, but never tapping into a community. So this was going strong, I want to say from July till September. In November, my Instagram and Facebook pages were just shut down, blocked. I couldn't get back in till today. Okay. This past month, I did a huge event, first in-person event, and lost one of my major clients due to some contract issues that weren't true before that date. So I don't know if that's a mental thing, but I do see it as a reoccurring pattern.
Okay. So kind of I'm just on the brink of like making it to the next level, and then something seemingly outside of my control happens to derail all of that. And that's been an ongoing pattern with
This has
myself.
been this has been an ongoing pattern before COVID, right? And it seems like I'm constantly picking myself back up. But today, as I'm on here with you, I think I said this, it feels like a heartbreak. It's like, okay, I'm trying. Now what? Like, don't leave me, baby. Where are you going? Like, help me. That's how I feel.
Got it. And that emotion that you have towards this, is that towards like it almost feels like unrequited love, like why do you keep leaving me? Like, are you talking to success, or like what are you, like what is that emotion directed to specifically for you?
So the motion is direct. Okay, so it's twofold, because there were times where I would stop. So for example, if something was going on in my personal life, it was like, okay, this supersedes my business. So there are times where I leave, but now I'm going full throttle, like nonstop, like investing everything, time, money, energy. And it's like it's slipping away. So it's like, okay, wait, I'm here 100% with you. What's happening now?
Got it. Have you ever by any chance read the Big Leap, that book, or are you aware of that book?
No, I've never even heard of it. Could you tell me more?
Okay. So he actually describes this very phenomenon. He calls it the upper limit problem. So I'd highly recommend you diving into that. But it's basically everything that you're saying, right? We have this ceiling that we go to where, from all the perspectives, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, energetically, we hit, and then it triggers all of our essentially our limits, all of the parts that want to stay the same, all of the inertia of the past and our patterns to basically sabotage the success, because something about going to the next level feels completely unsafe. And this will happen, like you said, both personally, like I will get the inclination to stop, I will create some drama, I will get involved in some kind of drama, or something seemingly external, like I every time I get sick right before some big thing happens, or circumstantial crashes tend to happen. And it's not the single instance of that is a thing that just kind of happens. It's when there's a pattern of these things. He calls that the upper limit problem. So I would highly recommend you or anybody else listening, if you have that, to pick up that book. Now diving into your own specific upper limit problem, that pattern of like it's about to go good, it's going great, I'm about to hit the next level. Does that pattern happen anywhere else in your life, or only in finances and business?
Um, I want to say thus far it's just been career. And I first noticed the pattern back in 2014 when I was teaching, when I was an adjunct in the city. It seemed like every time there was an opportunity for me to go forward, and this is like I said before I even started my business, it was like, okay, something happened that I had to stop focusing on that, because it seemed like it was more of a priority than the business.
Okay. And looking back on it historically, was it actually a bigger priority than the business?
Yeah, like, okay, I'll give you two examples. It would be something where my children would get sick or they would need my attention. Just recently, I had a flood in my home. So I had scheduled like all of these posts automated on MailChimp, and I was going forward with my business. And like my home just started to have like a flood from that, something that was happening in the walls for so many years. So we had to like leave and move. So it was like, okay, now what? So like I said, this has been a pattern for a while now.
Okay, got it. And just for the sake of playing devil's advocate, so in that instance, like your automated emails go automated, right? So it's like, yeah, I understand you're dealing with a very real issue with the flood, but those emails would have gone out anyway. So what was the issue in that specific example?
Where was I at when I was supposed to be meeting these people? I was in transition. I wasn't stable.
Right. Okay. So the emails did go out, but I wasn't in a position to actually take any of the potential response. So did you stop it completely, or did you just let it run and then we're like, hey, sorry, but I can't do this right now?
I believe I stopped it. Like even for example, with the Facebook group, it's still active. I just can't access it. So it seems as if I'm inconsistent. Like I'm there, but then it's like, oh, can't pay attention to this right now. You have to focus on this. And it does.
Okay. So I understand like that's a very real. So if we just focus on the flood bit, because that was like the first example that came up, and by all means, if you're like, no, that's BS, like you just feel free to call me out. Like you don't have to
No.
yeah. So all I'm saying is like the invitation is there. If I get something wrong, by all means call me out. So what I just want to point out is, yes, the circumstances are definitely tough, and the contribution that you shared there is the elimination of the possibility that there could be a good outcome in it. So what I mean by that is, like, these emails were set to go out. Yes, some crazy stuff happened, and I also stopped the possibility that I could actually have income possibility opportunities come in during this crash, right? Because I pressed stopped on all the work I've done up until that point, right? So that eliminates the possibility of like, could I have taken one of these calls at Starbucks? Could I have, been at somebody's house while this was happening who had Wi-Fi and taken one of these calls? Could I have closed a potential sale even in transition while being transparent with what's going on, right? Like those are all potential possibilities, but we're stopped by this one particular action. So what lands for you or what doesn't with that reflection?
So, okay, so yeah, so this is what I did to offset that. I hired an assistant, and the assistant now keeps things flowing, automated, ensuring that I show up. Like you said, during the transition, I was in a hotel, so I would meet downstairs in the hotel lobby or in the library. And it just felt like when I closed the laptop, it was like rush off to do this or rush. So it wasn't as if, even if I was like taking the calls, I wasn't there. And I was told a while ago from one of my professors, you should not work with other people if you yourself are not in a good space. And I knew I was not in a good space. So it wasn't authentic for me to be working then.
Okay. And that's fair, right? Like you know your experience obviously better than I do. So my deeper question then is like, okay, but this is a pattern,
Yes.
right? So it's like, is it true that every single time you are not in a space to operate within your highest good?
No, that's not true.
Okay.
But
So
this time was true.
was true. That's fair, right?
Yes. Mhm.
So in that instance, because if it's not true every single time, to what degree are you looking at the circumstances as evidence that this can't be done instead of asking yourself, how can I make this work?
I think when it becomes too much for me mentally, when I feel as if, like, for example, if we're on right now and something is happening to take my attention off of you, it's not fair to you that I'm not focusing on you because I'm not showing up 100% as when you introduced me in the beginning, I'm not showing up as that. And if I can't show up as that, I'm not going to do it. Now, there are times when I don't feel a certain way. It's the difference between like me just saying, oh, I'm having a bad day, or life is really kicking my behind right now. And I know as a coach, my energy is really one of my biggest gifts. And if I'm not giving off the proper energy, I shouldn't even be in communication.
Okay. And how often does that happen?
That doesn't happen often with, like I said, with if I'm dealing with clients, but this past situation was like, whoa. So I've been consistent from, I want to say November until just this week. Like just this week is when I just hit this bump and I was like, okay, no, stop.
Okay. And how is that related to the energy discussion you just had?
It's related to the energy discussion because, for example, I was in a meeting with my assistant on Friday and we were going over a project that should have been completed 2 weeks ago and it still wasn't complete. And I wasn't focusing on that project because, like I said, I was in the middle of planning the first event. So thinking I've delegated this responsibility. I know that this is going to be done when I said, because, I have no reason to believe that it's not. And then with the, after that, it just was like, this is wrong, that. And I was like, whoa, 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 just stop, just take a step back.
Okay. And is that like, does that feel like another one of those circumstances that just comes your way and like derails you, or does it feel like something else?
Initially it felt like a derailment, right? And I go on walks. I call them gratitude walks. And while I was on my walk the other day, I had to reckon with myself and I say, Elise, this should not stop you. Like, yes, it's happening, but it shouldn't derail the whole process. You have to get back up from this. And actually, you're the first business contact since all of this just happened on Thursday. So you're like my get up, let's go.
Okay. Got it. So in that instance, if this thing with the delegation felt like, okay, it was another external thing derailing you, have you asked yourself what your contribution to that particular derailment was?
Yes.
Okay. And what's the answer?
The answer is I put too much responsibility on one employee, and I don't think that he was ready to handle it, even though he said he would. So he initially agreed to update my website, but he was also my social media manager. So then I had to realize, wait, you haven't posted anything. Oh, I was working on your website. Oh, wait, you couldn't do both at the same time when you agreed. So I'm understanding that there has to be very, very clear communication. I can't put too much responsibility on one person and expect so much to be done. Like, I'm capable of doing a lot, but not everyone else is capable of doing that.
Okay. So you had an experience. You definitely learned something from that experience. You now have a better understanding of how to actually delegate things and what the expectation is on deliverables and the feedback loops surrounding that. So like overall, like it sounds like a good learning experience, even though you didn't like the outcome. But again, that's where learning happens. So now, really, my question to you is, it seems like the seeming thing that happened wasn't a major setback. It was like a bump. Like, would that
Yeah.
be accurate? Okay.
Yes.
Yet when you initially presented it, you presented it as like something that's going to derail you completely. And then as we dove into it, not only was there a lesson, but it was actually just like a bump, and actually a normal bump in terms of getting familiar with delegation. So do you also have a pattern where like you turn like molehills into mountains, right? Like this small bump becomes this big thing, and then until you realize it wasn't that big of a thing, etc. So what's landing there for you, if anything?
No, so I don't think that's, I understand what you're saying, but I think it had a lot to do with what I discussed about one of my major clients gave me an ultimatum. And I think that when I was like, okay, I can handle this. This is not impacting me. It really was. What I think what my issue is that what's really bothering me, I'm like, no, I'm fine. I'll be okay. I'm strong. And then something this insignificant can happen and then I'll blow up. But that's not the real issue. So I think that in terms of the delegation, that was kind of like the pressure cooker was on at that point. So it was just a matter of when I saw that, I was like, it's a failure. You lost your client. Like everything just started going in my mind that was going wrong. And no lie, right as we were starting this, my assistant just texted me because I just got like some certification or something. She's like, ma'am, guess what? We got it. So it's not like it's all like it's falling apart, but I think it's that I was in denial about how I really felt about one thing. So when that insignificant thing happened, it seemed like that was it.
Okay, so it's more like the straw that broke the camel's back, right?
Yes.
Like it's more like that. Okay, got it. So that was actually really interesting to hear, because now we're seeing patterns. Okay, so there's the catastrophizing bit, right? Like everything, regardless, big, small, medium, like everything is a big issue as far as the way that my brain processes it initially. Okay. And because that's the default of my brain, everything always seems to be going wrong. And there is a pattern of stuffing down or denying or pushing away or avoiding the feelings that come with that, until at some point there's something happens that like boils it all over. So
Yeah.
what lands for you from that reflection?
I'm 100% going with that. Because I think one thing for me is, especially with me being a coach and what, like, I embody resiliency. So it's like, I could take a licking and keep on ticking, but sometimes I don't want to take a licking. Sometimes I don't want to have to always, have something negative happen or bad in order for me to learn a lesson and progress. I can't just learn a lesson. It can't just be. So a lot of times when things happen to me, because there's so many other things going on, I'll have to say, oh, that doesn't bother me, when it really, really does. So I think denial is a big thing.
Right. And essentially it's like the pattern is I keep pushing things under the rug until finally there's so many bumps I can't really walk properly on it.
Right. And the
Okay.
things that should not impact me does.
Right. So the end result then is, if you keep avoiding all of the things, I keep trying to push it under the rug and pretend that it's actually not there. I keep trying to put a bow on it. I keep telling myself I should feel a different way. Ultimately, that's like continuously pushing like a ball underwater, like deeper and deeper and deeper. And then at some point, you can't keep the ball down any longer. You get tired and the ball pops back up.
Yeah.
Which is actually very synonymous with what your pattern looks like on the outside. I keep doing good things and then something crashes. But what if it's not actually circumstantially crashing? It's just you've reached your threshold of what you can avoid and stuff down under the carpet. So then something boils over, right? Like, and this could even look circumstantial, right? Like it could potentially look like, I avoided all of the signs that I may have a water leak until I couldn't avoid it any longer. And then the water leak finally broke. So in that
Right.
instance, it looks like, well, that has nothing to do with me. I don't control when the water breaks. But it's like, yeah, if I saw little leaks across a long spectrum
Yeah.
of time,
For 2 years.
then
Yeah.
okay, right. So there we go. So 2 years, this problem was looming. So it wasn't a matter of if it's going to happen, it's just a matter of when.
Yeah.
It's like when people talk about, oh, I always get these unexpected expenses coming at me that like I always put me back under. It's like, okay, fair, but like you have to change your tires every year, right? That if your car is X amount of years old, eventually you have to take it in for service, and it's probably going to happen once a year. So it's like, were they really unexpected, or were you just avoiding preparing for those things? So what's landing for you there?
So what's landing for me there is I remember having a conversation with my mom because we first noticed that there were like bubbles in the wall and like right before COVID. And when this all happened, my mom said, "But I thought you said you were moving." And I'm like, "You're right." But other things were happening. So it's like, okay, I'll get to it. And then it was to the point where it just flooded all over. So it was like, you have to deal with this right now.
Right. So in that instance, is it really like, is your issue really this long string of like bad luck or things always derailing you? Or is it really your tendency to avoid things that are negative until you have to deal with them?
I agree with that. I believe and this is the I want to say like oxymoron of it. Like I will deny anything that is not what I want it to be. So it's like, nope, that's not true. Nope, that's not true. And I'll tell myself I have faith to believe that what I want is what I will see. So I've learned to deny appearances. Like if that's not what I want to see, I'm not claiming that. That's not real. I'm not going to pay attention to it. Yes, I do that.
Right. And how's that been working for you?
Oh gosh. It has its like you said, like there's these lessons, but I don't want to continue to have these lessons. This has to stop at this point.
Right. So then going back to the original question, how's it been working for you?
Not good.
Not good. Okay. So if you want to stop, because it's also like, again, I'm very conscious of the words that we use because I feel like at some level they code the reality that we experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm tired of learning lessons in this way. And my question to you then is, well, did you actually learn the lesson if this continues and repeats?
No. Or
Right.
maybe I thought I learned and I didn't.
So then what did you do if you didn't learn the lesson?
So let's go back to the flood. I want to say I jumped right back in. Like I got a new game plan. I'm gonna do it this way. So I'll work harder at it. I'll take a break and then I'll just go harder at it. Like, okay, we'll do it. It's like I'm playing catch up. I'm making up for lost time. That's what I do when I go back in. But like I said, this time I don't want to play catch up. I don't want to throw 150 in. I really want to get to the bottom of it.
Right. So then after a crash, I then work hard to get back to a baseline. But again, have I actually learned a lesson, or have I just perpetuated the exact same thing?
Perpetuated the exact same thing.
Okay, perfect. So now, right, so you're in this space of awareness of, okay, so I have a tendency to catastrophize everything. When something does go wrong or seems negative, my default is to be in avoidance of it. I'm in avoidance of it until something really bad happens, and then I have to take action to fix it. So what are you actually not taking responsibility for?
Um, I'm not taking responsibility for the fact that I don't always pay attention. Whether that's consciously or unconsciously, I don't pay attention. It's like, oh, I didn't see that, or I didn't know that. And I can't afford to be that way.
Okay. And what might you be gaining by continuing to act this way?
The same thing that I've been experiencing,
Okay, which is what specifically?
which is go to a baseline and then it's like, up, something happens and we're back to starting all over again, catastrophizing.
Okay. So put a different way, what are you gaining from that pattern? Catastrophizing, crashing, going back again in that loop. Well, what might you be on some level, conscious or not, be gaining from that pattern?
Heartbreak, heartache, like it's giving me a mental strain. It's making me feel like, what are you doing wrong? What is wrong with you? Um, self-pity or self-sabotaging.
Okay. So again, let me ask it a different way. So when I say gaining, not necessarily what the consequences of it are. I think you're very self-aware as far as recognizing those. But when you are in that crash or in that loop,
Mm-hmm.
are there any advantages that you experience around that time? So for example, how do people around you react? Do you get support when you are in those states? Do people listen to you when you complain about those things? Do you get comments of like, oh man, that sucks, like why are you always like in this state, you have such bad luck? Like, well, what's the experience of that? Or that doesn't happen at all?
No, that doesn't happen at all. I'm the support. It's rarely that I'm reaching out to people saying that this is what's happening to me. I'll like internalize, because if I were to say to somebody, oh, I'm going through XYZ, the first thing they always say to me is like, oh, you're strong, you'll get over it. Oh, you'll be like, no one takes it seriously. So it doesn't even make sense to say this is happening, because then it will also be like, well, what are you doing? Or there's no sympathy that I'm gaining from them.
Okay, perfect. So that's helpful as well. And there is a like there is a level of significance your identity gets when you dig yourself out of situations, right? What's the response to everybody? Oh, you're strong, you'll figure this out. So a big part of your identity is rooted in like when stuff get like when, stuff gets hard, I figure it out. Like that's a big part of who you are and what people know you for. So
Yes.
does anything land for you there?
Yes. That um I don't want to say no one cares, but it's just like it's not that serious. Like you'll fake, like you'll be fine, or like it just there's no need to seek someone for advice. Like I could pick up the phone and call a friend and it's like, oh wow. Well, today, I went to the supermarket and it's like life goes on. There's no even need for me to tell somebody what's going on.
Got it. Okay. That's totally fair. I was just kind of checking because that oftentimes does happen in this pattern. So that's totally fine. So anyway, if you're looking at this now, zooming out, right? So there's the catastrophizing, there's avoiding all of the negatives, right? There's like running away from things until you have to own them. If you look at all of those patterns, how are they creating problems in your business?
So for my business, they're creating problems because it doesn't allow me to be as consistent as I would like to be.
Okay. And what's the consequence of that?
The consequence of that is sales. The consequence of that is not being able to have the clients that I would actually like to work with.
Okay. Anything else?
Sales, clients. I think also too, in terms of like now that I'm building my team, like now I have 4 staff members that I'm working with. And I guess also too, it's knowing what everyone's capacity, skill set and capacity level is too.
Okay. So like, even if you knew this capacity, is there instances where like you're painting red flags green or avoiding like difficult conversations or not following up on things? Like, I guess tell me a little bit more about what you mean by that.
So again, like what just recently happened with the so what I was originally doing for the past year, I have been working with 16 virtual assistants. And when I got this one virtual assistant to like cover everything, the goal was to cut costs. So I was trying to minimize, like, okay, I can condense this and I can have one person do these 2 things. And I think in doing that, again, what I did is I put too much responsibility on one. So it's not a matter of me not following up with them. It's a matter of I guess me just trying to, like you said, I think what did you call it? Head talk, where if one thing goes wrong, I automatically see it as everything going wrong when that's just not true.
Okay, it's like the catastrophizing, right? Like whatever happens is like now it's not just a little thing. It's like everything sucks. It's a catastrophe across the board.
I think what I start to do is I start to focus on everything that's going wrong that I was like, no, that's not happening. It's all of a sudden it's just like I see everything now that I was like, no, that'll be fixed. That'll be okay. So now it's like, and you have this and you have that. So it just echoes.
Right. So it's like the little problems accumulate into a big type of crash.
No and yes. It's like when it happens, I then start to focus on the other things that I wasn't focusing on before. So now I see everything. Whereas before I'm hopeful, like, okay, well, I know this situation is happening, but I'm hopeful that it'll get better. But then that one thing will happen and it'll make me aware. You remember, this is wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. And it's like, okay, like you're a failure. Like this is just not working. Like you need to stop.
Okay. So it's like I'm not taking responsibility of the little blips, the little setbacks. It's only when now a lot of things have accumulated that I finally have to take responsibility. And now it's this big thing staring at me in the face telling me, well, you're clearly a failure, you're clearly screwing this up again. We're going into that catastrophizing thing. Like that's
yes and no.
okay.
It's not when like they all happen. It's like one thing will happen that'll
Okay, so
make
one
me
thing.
aware that, remember, you also have these things that were happening too. You get it? So it's just like this is running rampant now. That's what's been happening.
Got okay. So then it's I guess a combination of a bunch of different things, right? So like I'm either not looking or I'm avoiding all the other things, and then something goes wrong, and now suddenly I see the other thing. So now it's all
Yes,
staring at me in my face,
yes,
and then we get into
yes,
the whole thing. Okay,
yes,
got it.
yes,
So really, at the end of it, it's whether it's a blind spot or whether it's conscious avoidance or, you know, some kind of hopeful lying, right? Like, oh, it'll get better on its own. It's still some type of avoidance, right? Like it has
yes.
its different subsets, but essentially, I don't
Of
take responsibility until I absolutely have to because I tend to avoid.
right, because
Okay.
with me, right, there's so many different things. It's like, okay, if that's not really real, I can't focus on that right now because there's so many other things that I have to focus on.
Yeah, got it. And then over time, those all compound and eventually something big breaks. And now it's like, okay, I got to dig myself out of that one. So,
Yeah.
okay, got it. So, who or what would you be if you lost the ability to avoid these issues?
To avoid avoiding.
Correct. So, like, you lost the ability to engage this avoidance pattern. Who or what would you be without that inner limit?
I really have no idea, honestly. That's a really good question that I can't answer at
Okay.
this time.
So, again, oftentimes comes up in these conversations and very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So much of your identity is rooted in acting in this way, thinking in this way, viewing the world through this way, that you can't even imagine who Elease is if she doesn't avoid things.
Yes, if I'm not like solving a problem, if I'm not fixing, if I'm not I did a career personality test, and I think one of the major signs was I'm good under pressure. Like I'm a good problem solver. And I'm like, wait, like before I took the exam, and I was just taking the exam because I was actually administering it. So I was like, okay, let me be the example. And when I took it myself, I was like, wait, what? So it's like I work well under pressure, and I'm a great problem solver. And I guess it's because, like you said, it's who I am.
So that is a good, like, that's the gift of your pattern, is when everything's going wrong, you're the person people want to rely on, and or you can figure it out. However, when, like, you are right now in the distortion of that gift, because
Yeah.
you're basically creating problems so you have problems to solve. Right? Like this pattern is so rooted, like so big part of your identity, to the degree that it actually shows up on a personality test, is I am someone who gets significance and or is really good at solving problems, to the point where I actually have to create them. And you, in your instance, you create problems by avoiding. Like you create bigger problems to solve by avoiding a whole host of little ones.
I agree.
Right? And it's so rampant, you can't even imagine what the stable version of you is.
I agree.
Okay. So if you had to push yourself, like use your imagination, it's a hypothetical question, who would you be if you lost this pattern? If you eliminated this pattern that you have to solve problems, you are an avoidant, and you just took responsibility, who would you be? What would that version of you look like?
I think that version of me would look like the version I have been striving to be since, I want to say, like forever now, like in terms of me really working with organizations and institutions and going in and solving their problems, right? It would be more of me solving other people's problems as opposed to me creating problems for myself.
Okay, so beautiful, right?
Unconsciously.
So that's what I would create.
Right.
Like I would create a business where I can actually utilize this quality fruitfully and usefully, right? Like it'd be a valuable, it'd be in my gift, because I can solve problems. So that's what I would create. I would create a business based on my gift. And I'm going to challenge you to dive deeper into like who you would be. How would you show up? How would you think, act, and feel? What would your being be like?
So I think I would tackle things head on, as opposed to saying, I'm gonna avoid this. I'm gonna pretend like I don't see this. I don't know that this is happening. Yeah, because I think that a lot of that's where it is right there. When things don't show up the way I assume or I expect it to, I automatically just like avoid it, thinking, okay, it's gonna get better. So I think that for me, it would mean, again, not getting stuck when things go right, and not catastrophizing and putting too much emphasis on what's not going right, and really kind of focus on what is and figuring out ways to, I was about to say avoid, not avoid, but to ensure that, okay, let's fix this, but let's ensure that this doesn't happen again. Let's not allow this to get so big where it overpowers the good that's happening.
Okay. So you can actually imagine who you would be like without this pattern.
Yes.
Right. But look how much prompting it took you to actually tap into that
Yes.
version of yourself. So it's like
Yes.
so deep rooted that it's actually hard for me to imagine, but I can actually get there. So
Yeah.
this part of you exists, it's just deeply buried underneath these patterns. So if you now put everything that we have talked about together, can you really create a stable 10K a month business with these patterns?
Yes, I know I can.
Okay. So the potential for, or like with all this avoidance, I can create a 10K a month business.
No, not with the avoidance. It would definitely mean seeing something, like it's that New York City slogan. If you see something, say something. Don't wait for things to get better. Don't think that it's going to change on its own. You have to put some work in to make this happen, to make this change. So that's what that is.
Correct. And if you eliminated this avoidance pattern, do you think it would be a lot easier for you to create those 10K months?
I believe so. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I believe so as well, because right now, that pattern is the one that's creating all the friction you experience in your life. So it's like,
Yeah.
it's a lot easier to avoid the holes than have to continuously dig yourself out of them.
Yeah.
Right. And for you, like you're walking through a road that's full of deep holes, but you're doing it with like a blindfold. And it's like, okay, well, I'm good. I'm good. Okay. And then I fall into the hole. And now, okay, let me do my thing to get out of the hole. And you're really good at getting out of holes. Right. What you're not really good at is actually being the part of you that takes the blindfold off and navigates around the holes to create enough stability and consistency to actually move the business forward in a proper way. Right. Like you don't want that everything like feast and famine, right? Like it's great, 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 then crash, and great, great, then crash, right? Like that's not a sustainable way emotionally, financially, mentally to actually get to where you want to go. So I'm glad that that's landing for you.
Yes, it did land.
Okay, perfect. So does this feel complete for you as far as like mapping this out, or is there still something left outstanding?
No, it does feel complete, and it resonates so much, because I often find that even with, like, when I'm working with individual clients, which has been some time now, a piece of their problem is my problem. Sometimes I find that. So as I'm listening to my clients, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's me too. And as I'm speaking to them, I'm sometimes speaking to myself. So, and it, like I said, it's been a while since I worked with clients individually. I've been doing more of the group and the corporate, which has allowed me to kind of be more of an observer or facilitated in like what we're doing right now, one-on-one, head on. So I'm grateful that I'm already going in the right direction. It's like you said, it's me avoiding the holes. It's me helping other people and companies get out of their holes instead of me always being the one to get out the hole. And who knows, like you said, maybe this all had to happen so that I can say, hey, I used to create these for myself and I was good at getting out of them, and now I can help you get out of them too.
Right. Well, and you will only know that when you actually do it, right? Like that's the time where you get to gauge, did I learn the lesson or did I not? If it repeats, then it's you have to acknowledge and not avoid that I actually did or did not learn that lesson. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, but I thank you for coming on and allowing yourself to be witnessed in this way, right? You didn't avoid this whole thing this time
I was
around.
about to.
So yeah, so good job and kudos to you for being ready to do it. So yeah, then why don't you just close us off and let everybody know where, like, who's the best person to find you, where they can find you. Floor is yours for that.
So I'm actually on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok at Reawaken Your Light, because that's what I do after people experience burnout, what we talked about today, falling into those holes. I hope you come out of it to reawaken your light.
Beautiful. Love it. Well, as always, we'll include all that in the show notes. And Elease, thank you very much for coming on. And for everybody else listening, we'll see you on the next one.